Imagine a world where the lines between criminal actions and legal rights are so blurred that a kidnapper can file a lawsuit against his victims for escaping his clutches. This sounds like the plot of a satirical comedy or a far-fetched television drama, but it is actually a cold, hard reality that unfolded in the heart of the United States. In the annals of true crime history, there are stories that terrify us and stories that confuse us, but rarely do we encounter a tale that leaves us completely baffled by the audacity of the perpetrator. This is the story of a man who believed that the law which he had so flagrantly violated could be twisted to serve his own delusional sense of justice. It is a narrative that challenges our understanding of the legal system and the psychology of those who operate outside the bounds of society. The central figure in this bizarre legal saga is a man named Jesse Dimmick. Before he became the punchline of legal jokes across the nation, he was a desperate fugitive running from a serious charge. In September 2009, Dimmick was 23 years old, and his life had spiraled completely out of control. He was not just a petty thief or a low-level offender, but a man wanted for a violent crime that had left a community in Colorado shaken. The events that led him to a quiet home in Kansas were fueled by adrenaline and fear, and a complete disregard for human life. To understand the absurdity of the lawsuit he later filed, we must first understand the gravity of the situation that preceded it, and the violent path that brought him to the doorstep of his unsuspecting victims. The story begins with a tragedy in Aurora, Colorado, where a man named Michael Wan was found dead. The police investigation quickly identified Jesse Dimmick as the prime suspect in the murder. A warrant was issued for his arrest, and the manhunt began. Dimmick knew that his time was running out, and he made the decision to flee across state lines. He stole a vehicle and headed east, hoping to disappear into the vast landscapes of the Midwest. This flight from justice was not a calculated strategic retreat, but a chaotic dash for freedom that would endanger countless lives along the way. As he crossed into Kansas, the tension escalated, and law enforcement agencies were alerted to the presence of a dangerous fugitive in their jurisdiction. By the time Jesse Dimmick reached the area near Topeka, Kansas, the police were hot on his trail. A high-speed chase ensued on the highway, with Dimmick pushing the stolen vehicle to its limits in a desperate attempt to outrun the flashing lights and sirens behind him. The chase was dangerous and erratic, weaving through traffic and threatening the safety of other drivers on the road. The police deployed stop sticks to puncture the tires of the fleeing van, hoping to bring the pursuit to a safe end. The maneuver worked, and the vehicle careened off the road and crashed near the small town of Dover. Dimmick, however, was not ready to surrender. He scrambled out of the wrecked van and took off on foot, running blindly into the surrounding residential area. In the quiet town of Dover, a young couple named Jared and Lindsay Rowley were enjoying a peaceful evening at home. They had no idea that a fugitive suspected of murder had just crashed his vehicle nearby and was currently sprinting through their neighborhood looking for a place to hide. The sanctity of their home was about to be violated in the most terrifying way possible. Dimmick, desperate and cornered, spotted their house and decided it would be his sanctuary. He burst into the home, confronting the startled couple. At this moment, the situation was a classic home invasion scenario, with a terrified couple facing a dangerous intruder who had nothing left to lose. Jesse Dimmick was armed with a knife when he entered the Rowley residence. The initial moments of the confrontation were filled with high tension and fear. Jared and Lindsay Rowley were suddenly thrust into a nightmare scenario, facing a man who was clearly agitated and on the run from the police. Dimmick barred the door and made it clear that he was in charge. He told them he was being chased by the police and that he needed a place to lay low until the heat died down. For the Rowleys, the priority was survival. They needed to keep this volatile stranger calm and ensure that no violence occurred within their home. However, as the adrenaline of the initial break-in began to fade, something strange happened. The dynamic in the house shifted from a violent hostage situation to something far more surreal. Dimmick began to talk to the couple not just as hostages, but almost as confidants. He explained his situation, claiming that he had been framed for the murder in Colorado, and that he just needed time to figure things out. The Rowleys, sensing an opportunity to de-escalate the situation, decided to play along. They listened to his story and offered him comfort rather than resistance. This psychological tactic was a brilliant survival strategy, but Dimmick misinterpreted their compliance as genuine sympathy. The atmosphere in the house became bizarrely casual. Dimmick, who had just led police on a high-speed chase and broken into a home, settled down on the couch. The Rowleys offered him snacks and drinks to keep him placated. They gave him Cheetos and Dr. Pepper, which he consumed, while continuing to explain his plight. The terrifying intruder was now eating junk food in their living room, and the lines of the hostage situation began to blur. Dimmick started to believe that he had found allies rather than victims. He convinced himself that Jared and Lindsay were on his side and were willing to help him escape the authorities. It was during this time that the alleged agreement took place. According to the later claims made by Dimmick, he and the Rowleys struck a deal. He offered them an unspecified amount of money if they would hide him from the police and help him escape once the coast was clear. In his mind, this was a legally binding oral contract. He believed that by offering money and receiving their verbal assurance of safety, he had entered into a protected arrangement. The Rowleys, terrified and willing to say anything to survive, likely nodded and agreed to whatever he proposed, just to keep him calm and prevent him from using the knife. To further cement this delusional bond, Dimmick asked to watch a movie. The couple put on the film Patch Adams. The three of them sat in the living room watching the comedy drama, as if they were old friends hanging out on a Friday night. The surreal nature of the scene cannot be overstated. Outside, a massive police manhunt was underway, with officers scouring the area for an armed and dangerous murder suspect. Inside, that suspect was laughing at a movie and eating snacks, while his hostages sat nervously beside him, waiting for the perfect moment to make their move. As the movie played on, the exhaustion of the flight and the adrenaline crash began to take a toll on Jesse Dimmick. The comfort of the couch, the fullness of his stomach, and the false sense of security provided by the Rowleys lulled him into a state of drowsiness. His eyelids grew heavy, and he began to nod off. The Rowleys watched him closely, their hearts pounding in their chests. This was the opportunity they had been praying for. They waited until his breathing deepened, and he was fully asleep before they made their move. They signaled to each other silently and crept toward the door. Jared and Lindsay Rowley managed to unlock the door and slip out of their own house, leaving the sleeping fugitive behind. They ran into the cool night air and immediately contacted the authorities. The relief of escaping the house was overwhelming, but the danger was not yet over. They informed the police that Dimmick was inside asleep on their couch. The law enforcement officers, who had been searching the area for hours now, had the location of their suspect. The standoff was about to enter its final and most violent phase. The police surrounded the Rowley home. When they made their entry, the commotion woke Jesse Dimmick. Realizing that his hostages had fled and that he was surrounded, he reacted with panic. During the confrontation, a police officer's gun discharged, and a bullet struck Dimmick. He was wounded but alive. The authorities quickly moved in and secured him, ending the standoff. Dimmick was taken into custody and transported to a hospital for treatment before being moved to jail. The nightmare for the Rowleys was finally over, or so they thought. In the aftermath of the crime, Jesse Dimmick faced a litany of charges. He was charged with kidnapping, burglary, and other offenses related to the events in Kansas. He also still faced the murder charge in Colorado. The legal system began its slow process of bringing him to justice. The Rowleys, traumatized by the event, filed a civil lawsuit against Dimmick seeking damages for the emotional distress and invasion of privacy they had endured. It was a standard legal move for victims of such a harrowing crime. They expected Dimmick to have no defense. However, Jesse Dimmick was not done with the legal system. Sitting in his jail cell, he began to formulate a response that would shock the legal community and the public alike. He decided to file a countersuit against Jared and Lindsay Rowley. He drafted the legal documents himself, writing out his grievances in handwritten notes. His claim was not that he was innocent of the break-in, but that the Rowleys had wronged him by escaping. He believed that they had violated the trust he had placed in them, and more importantly, they had breached the contract they had made in the living room. The lawsuit filed by Dimmick sought $235,000 in damages. He argued that he had a legally binding oral contract with the Rowleys. He claimed that he had offered them money in exchange for hiding him, and that by accepting this offer, they were legally obligated to protect him from the police. When they escaped and alerted the authorities, Dimmick argued they had committed a breach of contract. He stated in his filing that he sued the Rowleys for breach of contract and that they had agreed to hide him for an unspecified amount of money. The audacity of the claim made headlines around the world. Legal experts were baffled by the logic. A contract to commit a crime or to aid a fugitive is void from the beginning under the principles of law. One cannot legally contract to perform an illegal act. Therefore, even if the Rowleys had promised to hide him, and even if money had exchanged hands, the contract would have been unenforceable in any court of law. Dimmick, however, seemed to genuinely believe that he had a case. He felt betrayed, and he wanted the court to recognize his grievance. The media dubbed him the criminal who sued his hostages, and the story became a viral sensation. It highlighted the often strange and unpredictable nature of the American legal system, where anyone can file a lawsuit for almost anything regardless of its merit. People laughed at the absurdity of a kidnapper demanding compensation from his victims for saving their own lives. It was a dark comedy come to life, a testament to the delusion that can accompany criminal behavior. But for the Rowleys, it was a frustrating reminder of the night they wanted to forget. As the case moved through the court system, the Rowleys' attorney filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit. The motion argued that the claim was frivolous and had no basis in law. The attorney pointed out the obvious fact that a contract to hide a fugitive is illegal and void. Furthermore, the Rowleys had been under extreme duress. Any agreement made while a man with a knife is in your living room is made under coercion and is therefore invalid. The consent was not voluntary, it was a survival mechanism. The judge presiding over the case did not take long to reach a decision. In a ruling that surprised no one, the judge dismissed Jesse Dimmick's lawsuit. The court affirmed that one cannot enforce a contract that involves illegal activity. The judge also noted the absurdity of the situation, stating that the Rowleys were victims of a crime, not willing participants in a business deal. The dismissal was a victory for common sense and a relief for the Rowleys, who could finally put the legal harassment behind them. With the civil suit dismissed, Jesse Dimmick still had to face the consequences of his criminal actions. In Kansas, he was convicted of kidnapping and other charges related to the home invasion. He was sentenced to nearly 11 years in prison for these crimes. Following his time in Kansas, he was extradited to Colorado to to face the murder charge for the death of Michael Wan. In the Colorado case, he eventually pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and received a significantly longer sentence, ensuring that he would remain behind bars for decades. The legacy of the Jesse Dimmick case is one of legal curiosity and disbelief. It serves as a prime example of the misuse of the legal system by those who do not understand its fundamental principles. It is often cited in law schools and legal discussions as an extreme example of a frivolous lawsuit. The case illustrates the concept of void contracts in a way that no textbook ever could. It shows that while the right to access the courts is fundamental, it is not without limits when it comes to absurdity and illegality. For Jared and Lindsay Rowley, the experience was a traumatic event that they managed to survive through quick thinking and cooperation. Their decision to offer snacks and watch a movie likely saved their lives by de-escalating a volatile situation. Their escape was brave and necessary. The fact that they were later sued for this bravery is a cruel irony, but one that ultimately failed to hold up under scrutiny. They became reluctant celebrities in the true crime world, known as the couple who outsmarted a killer with Cheetos and Dr. Pepper. The story also sheds light on the psychology of criminals like Dimmick. His ability to compartmentalize his actions and view himself as a victim in a situation he created is a common trait among certain types of offenders. He genuinely believed that his oral agreement superseded the laws against harboring a fugitive. This distorted thinking allowed him to justify his lawsuit and feel righteous indignation when it was dismissed. It is a chilling reminder of how different the world looks through the eyes of a desperate man. The details of the snacks in the movie add a layer of mundane reality to the horror. The image of a murderer watching Patch Adams and eating chips is a stark contrast to the violence of the high-speed chase that preceded it. It reminds us that crime does not always look like it does in the movies. It can be awkward, quiet, and filled with strange moments of calm before the storm. The Rowleys navigated this strange terrain, perfectly playing the role of hosts to a man who could have ended their lives at any moment. This case remains a staple in discussions about tort reform and the need to prevent frivolous litigation from clogging up the courts. While Dimmick's lawsuit was dismissed quickly, it still required the time and resources of the judicial system. It forced the victims to hire a lawyer and respond to the filings. It demonstrated that the barrier to entry for filing a lawsuit is low, which is generally a good thing for access to justice, but can be abused by individuals with nothing better to do than harass their victims from a prison cell. The Jesse Dimmick saga is a unique chapter in the great book of American crime. It combines elements of high-stakes danger with low-stakes absurdity. It features a villain who is both terrifying and ridiculous. It features heroes who use snacks as a weapon of defense. And it features a legal twist that is stranger than fiction. It is a story that will likely be told for generations as a warning about the unpredictability of human behavior and the complexities of the justice system. As we reflect on this case, we are left with a lingering question about the nature of justice. Dimmick sought to use the sword of the law to strike at those he had already victimized. The system worked in the end, protecting the Rowleys and punishing Dimmick. But the very fact that the lawsuit could be filed and entertained for even a moment is a testament to the open nature of our legal framework. It is a system that must tolerate the absurd to ensure that the legitimate grievances are heard. In the end, Jesse Dimmick remains in prison, a man defined by his crimes and his failed attempt to rewrite the rules of the game. The Rowleys have moved on with their lives, carrying the memory of that September night, but refusing to be defined by it. The house in Dover, Kansas stands as a silent witness to the night a fugitive came to dinner and tried to sue his hosts. It is a reminder that truth is often stranger than fiction, and that in the world of true crime, anything is possible. So the next time you hear about a frivolous lawsuit, remember the name Jesse Dimmick. Remember the Cheetos, the Dr. Pepper, and the movie Patch Adams. Remember the couple who escaped and the criminal who felt betrayed by their survival. It is a story that proves that while you can sue anyone for anything in America, you cannot sue your way out of the consequences of your own criminal actions. Justice may be blind, but it is not stupid.